By late afternoon, the heat shimmered like a mirage across the Red Mesa Plains. Wind dragged ribbons of red dust across the hardpan, painting the horizon in copper and gold. A lone figure moved through it, a woman, her steps faltering, her breath shallow. Luda. Once the daughter of a proud Apache family, now nothing but a ghost wrapped in a torn wool blanket. Her long black hair, heavy with dust and sweat, clung to her neck like a shadow that refused to leave. Her swollen belly pushed against the thin fabric of her dress. She'd been walking for miles. God only knew how many. Behind her, the wagon tracks of the white traders had long vanished under windblown sand. They had taken her for a price. Safe passage west, they promised. But when they learned she carried mixed blood, they tossed her out like a cursed thing. A pregnant Apache widow wasn't worth a fight. The sun sank lower, fierce and unblinking, burning her skin until it blistered. Every breath tasted like dust and copper. Somewhere in the emptiness, a buzzard circled, black wings slicing the orange sky. Her vision blurred, her knees gave out, and that was when the first pain hit. A deep, splitting wave tore through her body, the unmistakable cry of labor. She gasped, clutching her stomach, crawling to the shade of a dead mesquite tree. But there was no real shade, just a darker kind of heat. "Spirits, stay with me," she whispered in Apache, her voice rasping like broken glass. Another contraction struck, then another. Her screams echoed through the desert, carried away by the wind. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. In the desert, time doesn't walk. It crawls. By the time the sun sank behind the blood-red cliffs, two faint cries pierced the dying light. Two tiny bodies lay against her chest, wrapped in the only thing she had left, the torn edges of her shawl. One baby's cry was sharp, angry. The other's was weak, barely a whisper. She looked down at them, her cracked lips trembling. "You came from fire," she murmured. "Don't let the world put it out." The wind blew harder. The buzzard circled closer. She tried to stand, but her legs refused. Blood soaked into the earth beneath her. Somewhere in the distance, a horse neighed. She tried to lift her head, saw only blinding light, then darkness swallowing everything. The sound of hooves broke the silence. A horse slowed to a stop beside her, snorting, its breath white in the cooling air. The rider dismounted, a man in his 40s, sunburned, lean, wrapped in a dust-stained duster. A rifle hung from his saddle, a silver star half-polished but long retired on his chest. Wade Ransom. He'd seen bodies before, too many after the war and the raids. But this one made him pause. A woman, her face streaked with blood and dust. Two newborns pressed against her skin. "Jesus," he muttered under his breath. He crouched beside her, pressing two fingers to her neck. A pulse, weak but still there. Then he looked at the babies, one crying softly, the other barely moving. His stomach knotted. He'd buried his own wife 3 years ago. Fever took her before the snow melted. She'd wanted children. He'd told her the land was too cruel for that. Now looking at these two tiny creatures, he wasn't so sure anymore. He took a deep breath. Old habits whispered in his ear. "Leave her. She's Apache. The army calls them enemies." But another voice, the one he'd tried to silence with whiskey and long rides, spoke louder. "If you leave her here, you'll be the kind of man you already hate." He stood there for a long moment, caught between ghosts. The wind changed direction. The buzzard cried again. "Damn it," he growled. He pulled his canteen from his saddlebag and poured a few drops on her lips. The woman stirred, a faint tremor in her chest. Her eyes fluttered open, dark, wild, full of something between fear and disbelief. He spoke quietly, his voice rough. "Easy now. You're safe." But she didn't understand his words, only the tone. Her hands moved protectively over the babies. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he said, his accent thick with Texas dust. "You'll die out here." She tried to whisper something, but only air came out. Wade hesitated, then reached down, sliding one arm beneath her shoulders and another under her knees. She was lighter than she looked, bones and exhaustion. The two babies squirmed between them, still breathing, still fighting. He carried her to his horse, a chestnut gelding named Cooper. The horse snorted, uneasy. "Yeah, I know," Wade muttered. We're both fools tonight. He adjusted the saddle blanket, settling Luda in front of him, holding her steady with one arm while the other cradled the infants in his coat. The moon began to rise, spilling pale light across the desert floor. They rode in silence, save for the faint whimpers of the newborns and the whisper of hooves over sand. Wade kept glancing down, at the woman's face pressed against his chest, at the blood that had soaked through his sleeve. She wasn't going to last the night if he didn't move fast. The trail toward Red Mesa was long, winding through canyons that looked like broken teeth. Coyotes howled in the distance, their voices echoing off the stone. Wade tightened his grip on the reins. "You hang on now," he muttered. "Don't make me bury you too." He didn't know why he said it, but the words came out like a prayer. By midnight, the air turned cold. The desert, cruel as ever, gave nothing without taking something back. When they reached the ridge above his ranch, the valley below glowed silver under the moonlight. The barn, the old windmill, the corral standing like bones against the horizon. He stopped the horse near the well, his breath fogging in the chill. Carefully, he lifted Luda down. Her head rolled against his chest. "Stay with me," he murmured, pressing a rag against her temple. Her eyelids flickered. The babies stirred, their cries weak but alive. He looked around. Nothing but the quiet hum of night, the smell of dust and sagebrush. The world felt too still, too fragile. "All right," he sighed. "Guess it's just us now." He carried her into the house, kicking the door shut behind him. The lantern light trembled, revealing a room filled with silence, the kind only widowers know. He laid her on the bed, then turned to the fireplace. The wood was damp, but he coaxed it into flame anyway. Warm light filled the room, chasing shadows off the walls. He cleaned her wounds with whiskey. It burned, but she didn't move. He covered her and the babies with a blanket. Outside, the wind howled like a warning. Inside, the fire cracked, and for the first time in years, Wade Ransom said a prayer he didn't believe in. "Lord, don't let her die." Near dawn, he stepped outside to fetch more firewood. The moon was sinking, the sky bleeding into pale pink. From where he stood, he could see the desert stretching endlessly. The same desert that had taken his wife, his peace, and almost this stranger's life too. He spat into the dust and whispered, "You don't forgive, do you?" The desert gave no answer, only the wind. When he went back inside, the babies were quiet, asleep against their mother's chest. Luda's breathing was shallow but steady. A single tear had dried on her cheek. Wade sat in the chair beside the bed, his rifle across his knees, watching the fire die down to embers. Outside, the coyotes stopped howling. The sun touched the horizon, turning everything gold. He looked at her one last time before sleep claimed him and muttered under his breath, "Guess we'll see what kind of mistake I just made." The Ransom Ranch sat at the edge of the world, or at least that's how it felt. A patch of cracked land pressed between the desert and the mountains, too dry for corn, too lonely for laughter. Wind moaned through the corral fence and rattled the barn doors like something half alive. When Wade brought the Apache woman home, the whole place seemed to hold its breath. The ranch hands stopped what they were doing, staring from the fence line. The older one, Hank, wiped his hands on his trousers and muttered, "Hell, boss. What you dragging this time?" "Don't start," Wade said, his voice low and flat. "She's near dead. That's all you need to know." "She one of them?" Hank's eyes flicked toward Luda, slumped in the saddle, her skin pale as clay beneath the dirt. "'Cause if the townsfolk see her—" "They won't," Wade snapped, cutting him off. He tugged on Cooper's reins and rode toward the barn. Luda didn't speak, didn't even lift her head. The wind blew strands of black hair across her face, and she looked like something between a woman and a ghost. Behind the barn, Wade built a small shelter. 4 posts, a roof of scrap wood, and a cot that had seen better years. It wasn't much, but it was out of the wind. He lined the walls with old feed sacks to block the cold. "She'll stay here," he told Hank. "No one goes near her unless I say so." Hank spat into the dirt. "You'll bring trouble on yourself, Wade." "Maybe," he said, setting down a bucket of water. "But trouble's got a way of finding me, whether I invite it or not." He left it at that. That night, the desert turned cold fast. a cruel, dry chill that cut through every crack of wood and bone. Wade lit a lantern and carried it out to the shack. Inside, Luda lay still, her breathing shallow, two infants tucked against her chest beneath a tattered blanket. He set the lantern down and knelt beside her. "You're safe here," he murmured, though he wasn't sure she'd understand. "Ain't nobody gonna harm you." The words sounded strange in his mouth, like a promise he didn't trust himself to keep. He soaked a rag in warm water and cleaned the blood from her hands, from her face. Her skin was cool to the touch. Every time she stirred, his stomach tightened. Not from fear, but from something that felt too close to guilt. He'd fought her people once. He'd seen the smoke of their villages, the bodies left in the dust. He'd called it war back then, but looking at her now, it just felt like murder with a badge. He fed the fire through the night. When dawn crept in, he found himself still awake, watching the faint rise and fall of her chest. By morning, the ranch was alive again. Horses stamping, chickens calling, men at work. But whispers rode the air faster than the wind. The widow from the trading road, the Apache woman. They said Wade Ransom had lost his mind. At the general store in town, tongues wagged louder. Man like him taking in an Indian? Maybe he's cursed. You remember what happened to his wife. Ghosts stick to folks like him. Even his hired hands gave him distance. They did their work but never met his eye. The youngest, Jimmy, crossed himself whenever he walked past the shack. Children from the nearby homestead came once, peeking through the fence to see the wild woman. When Luda stepped outside, they scattered like birds. For days, she barely moved. Her body had been broken by the desert, her spirit by grief. The babies cried weakly, but she couldn't lift them without trembling. Wade brought her food, broth, bread, milk, and left it by the door. Sometimes she ate, most times she didn't. He told himself he didn't care, that he was just doing what any man with a conscience would. But every night, he found himself back at that shack, feeding the fire, making sure she was still breathing. On the fifth night, she woke. He'd been half asleep in the chair beside the door when he heard her whisper something. Soft, broken, the sound of wind through dry reeds. He opened his eyes. She was looking at him. Her gaze was sharp, cautious, like a wounded animal trying to decide if the hand reaching out meant kindness or death. Wade cleared his throat. "Don't try to move. You need rest." She didn't respond, just tightened her arms around the babies. "I ain't here to hurt you," he said quietly. "You'd be 6 feet under if I hadn't stopped when I did." Her lips parted, a faint tremor. "Why?" The word was cracked, barely English. He hesitated. "Guess I just couldn't walk away." Her brow furrowed. She didn't understand. Or maybe she did, but didn't believe him. He sighed, rubbing his face with one hand. "I'm not doing this out of pity," he said finally. "I just couldn't stomach leaving another soul to the buzzards." The fire popped between them. For a long while, neither spoke. When he left, she was still awake, her eyes following him through the crack in the door until he disappeared into the darkness. Days turned into a week. The babies grew stronger. So did she. Wade built her a pen behind the barn where she could hang blankets to dry. Sometimes he saw her standing there at dusk, looking toward the horizon, the wind tugging at her hair. He never asked what she was thinking. He figured she'd lost enough without him prying into it. At night, though, he couldn't shake the feeling that her presence had stirred something in the house. Something old and restless. The nights grew louder. The groan of timbers, the cry of coyotes, the distant hum of wind through the rafters. He caught himself talking to his late wife's portrait less, and to the empty air more. It felt like the house itself was listening. On the 10th night, a storm rolled in from the west. You could smell it before you saw it, that metallic scent of rain and dust and death. The sky turned bruised purple, and the wind screamed through the mesquite trees. Horses panicked in the corral. The barn doors slammed open and shut, thunder cracking overhead. Wade grabbed his rifle and stepped out onto the porch. Sand whipped at his face, stinging his eyes. The air was so thick you could hardly breathe. He heard something, a low, guttural growl from the back of the property. "Damn coyotes again," he muttered. He ran toward the shack, boots sinking into shifting sand. Lightning flashed. For an instant, he saw a dark shape near the door, low and moving fast. "Get away!" he shouted, firing once into the air. The shape didn't stop. Another flash of lightning, and he saw it clearly this time. A wolf, bigger than any he'd ever seen, its fur slick with rain, its eyes glinting yellow. It lunged for the doorway. He fired again. The wolf dropped mid-stride, skidding into the dirt a few feet from the door. For a second, silence. Then the babies cried out. Wade lowered his rifle, breathing hard, heart pounding like thunder. The storm howled around him, whipping the hem of his coat. He stepped closer to the shack and saw her standing there. Luda, clutching both children, her face pale in the lightning flash. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Two survivors caught between night and day. Wade broke the silence first. "Ain't no ghost tonight," he said softly. "Just the living trying to stay that way." She didn't answer, but the fear in her eyes eased, just a little. He turned, chambered his rifle again, and stood watch at her door until the storm began to fade. By dawn, the ground was slick with mud and blood, the wolf's body lying cold in the sand. Wade buried it behind the barn. When he came back, the door to the shack was open. Luda was sitting by the small fire, her children asleep beside her. She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, there was something human, something almost grateful, in her gaze. He tipped his hat. She nodded, just once. Outside, the wind carried the smell of wet earth, rare and fleeting in the desert. The house still creaked and whispered. But that morning, for the first time in a long while, Wade Ransom didn't hear ghosts, only the quiet breathing of the living. Spring in Red Mesa didn't come with flowers. It came with wind. A dry, restless wind that scraped the skin and carried the scent of dust, horses, and the faraway rain that never seemed to fall. By the time the mesquite trees began to turn green again, Luda could walk on her own. Her strength returned slowly, like a fire learning to burn again after the ashes cooled. The twins, the strong, noisy little things, kept her busy enough that the days passed without thought. At first, she stayed close to the shack, but Wade started leaving small chores where she could find them. A broken fence post leaning against the barn, a pail that needed patching, shirts that needed mending. He never asked her to help. He just left the work there and went about his day. And she did it, every time. The rhythm of the ranch began to shift. Wade noticed it, though he never said a word. The horses seemed calmer when she was near. The chickens, too. Even the dogs stopped barking at night. One morning, he found her in the corral, feeding hay to his mare. The twins lay asleep in a basket beside the fence. The sun painted everything gold. Her hair, the dust rising from the ground, the worn boards of the barn. She looked up when she sensed him watching. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she pointed to the sky. "Rain, come." Her accent clipped, soft. Wade frowned and looked around. The sky was clear as glass. "Don't look like it." She smiled faintly, shook her head. "Listen." He did. At first, all he heard was the creak of wood and the breath of the horses. Then faint, almost invisible, a rhythm in the air. Cicadas. "They sing before rain," she said. He grunted, half amused. "You read bugs. I read clouds." She tilted her head, curious. "Clouds?" He pointed east. "See those long white ones? That means dry spell's breaking. You'll smell rain in a day or two." She nodded slowly, filing the words away like they meant something sacred. Over the next few weeks, that strange, quiet understanding between them grew. He taught her simple English, words for things around the ranch: horse, fire, bread, home. She'd repeat each one, lips forming the shapes carefully, sometimes laughing when she got it wrong. In return, she taught him small things: Apache words for wind and fire, the names of stars, how to tell direction by how a blade of grass bent in the breeze. It wasn't a friendship, not yet, but it wasn't fear anymore. There was one afternoon, a long, lazy one, when Wade came back from town and found her sitting outside with the twins. The babies were squirming, fussing, their tiny hands tangled in each other's hair. Luda tried to braid one of the boy's dark curls to keep it out of his eyes, but her hands were full. She looked up exasperated when Wade stopped nearby. You, she said, pointing at him, then mimed twisting her fingers. Help! Wade blinked, caught off guard. You want me to braid? She nodded firmly. He rubbed the back of his neck, awkward. Ain't never done that before? She laughed. Actually laughed. A sound that startled both of them. It wasn't loud or forced. It was light, like a creek running over stone. He sighed, sat down beside her, and tried. His rough fingers fumbled through the fine strands, too tight, then too loose. The boy started squirming. No, Luda said gently, taking his hand. Soft. She guided his touch, her fingers brushing his. Warm, steady, alive. When he finally managed something that looked halfway like a braid, she nodded in approval. Good, he chuckled. Don't look good to me. Good enough, she said. For a moment, the air felt softer. The twins gurgled. The sun dipped lower, painting everything in amber. That night, as Wade sat on the porch with a cup of coffee, he could still hear the echo of her laughter carried on the wind. It had been a long time since the house sounded like that. Not hollow, not haunted. Just alive. But peace in the desert never lasted long. A week later, Wade was repairing the fence near the road when a rider approached. A thin, dusty man carrying a leather satchel and the nervous air of someone who didn't like being out this far. Mail for Wade Ransom? He called. Wade set his hammer down, nodded. That'd be me. The man handed over a folded packet, sealed with the stamp of the U.S. Cavalry. He wiped sweat from his brow. Orders come down from Fort Lowell. Words traveling fast. Word about what? The man hesitated. They're looking for an Apache woman. Escaped from a wagon train headed north. Killed a soldier, they say. Had twins with her. Wade froze, his hand tightening around the packet. The man didn't notice. He went on talking. Said she was dangerous. There's a reward for information. $50 for word, $100 for capture. Wade's jaw worked. That's so. Hell, if she's out here, I'd shoot first and ask later. The rider gave a crooked grin. They don't send cavalry this way for nothing. Wade didn't answer. He just turned and started walking back toward the barn. Hey, the man called after him. You see anything? Wade turned his head slightly. I don't see nothing but sand and sky. You'd best be riding before the wind shifts. The mail carrier muttered something under his breath, spurred his horse, and disappeared down the road. Back inside, Wade broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Wanted for questioning. Apache woman, approximately 25 years of age, medium height, dark hair. Escaped following a raid near Tucson, believed armed. May have 2 infants. Approach with caution. Capture or kill. His eyes caught on the last line. Reward for compliance. He stared at it for a long time, the firelight flickering across his face. Then he looked out the window. Across the yard, Luda was carrying a bucket of water from the well. The twins waited in their basket near the porch, kicking their little legs. One of them laughed, loud enough for him to hear. Something in his chest twisted. He'd brought her here thinking he was saving her life. Now he wasn't so sure if he'd just made her a target. The desert was changing. Word traveled fast and soldiers didn't forgive. Same as the desert. That night, the air was heavy with the smell of dust and cedar smoke. The babies slept, and Luda sat by the fire, sewing one of Wade's shirts. Her movements were quiet, methodical. The lamp beside her threw warm light across her face, catching in her eyes. Wade stood in the doorway, the letter still folded in his hand. She looked up, sensing his presence. You go town? She asked carefully, her English halting but clear. He nodded. Yeah, town. Bad news? He didn't answer right away. The fire cracked. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. They're looking for someone, a woman, Apache. Her hand stopped moving. She didn't breathe. For what? She whispered. He hesitated, then told the truth. Said she escaped a raid, killed a soldier. They got orders to bring her in, alive or not. The silence between them thickened. Not empty, but heavy, filled with everything they couldn't say. After a long while, she spoke. You tell them? He met her gaze. No. She stared at him, searching for a lie. She didn't find one. He looked down at the letter again, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. "If they come here," he said, "they won't find you. You got my word." For a moment neither moved. Then she nodded once. Slow, solemn. Outside, the wind picked up again. Not cold this time, just steady. It slid through the cracks of the house and whispered across the coals like a warning. Wade tossed the letter into the fire. The paper curled, blackened, then vanished. Later that night, he sat alone by the hearth. The last of the whiskey burned his throat, but it didn't warm him. He stared at the flames until the ink from the letter had turned to ash. On the mantel, the light flickered across the brass buckle from his old cavalry uniform. A ghost of the man he used to be. "Capture or kill," he murmured, shaking his head. He poured the rest of the whiskey into the fire, watching it flare bright before fading to embers. When the flames dimmed, his face was hard, unreadable. The look of a man who'd made a promise to a woman he barely knew, and to ghosts that wouldn't let him sleep. The night was so still you could hear the coyotes breathe. A full moon hung above Red Mesa, white and merciless, casting long shadows across the desert floor. The land glowed pale and cold, like a stage waiting for its violence to begin. Wade Ransom stood on his porch, rifle resting against the post, a cigarette burning low between his fingers. The horses had been restless all evening, ears twitching, eyes rolling, hooves striking the dirt with nervous rhythm. He could feel it too. Trouble had been riding his way ever since the letter from Fort Lowell. Inside the house, Luda was feeding the twins by the fire. Their tiny sounds, soft coos and sleepy sighs, drifted through the cracked door behind him. It was the only warmth in a night that otherwise felt made of stone. Then he heard it, the faint clatter of hooves. 5 riders, maybe 6, coming slow from the east. Wade took a deep breath, tossed the cigarette into the dust and whispered, "So it begins." They came out of the darkness like vultures, 3 men in uniform and 2 in dust-stained hats, their faces hidden under the brims. The soldiers carried Winchester rifles. The bounty men carried everything else: greed, whiskey, and the smell of death. One of the soldiers reined in his horse near the fence. "Wade Ransom?" Wade didn't move from the porch. "That's right. We're looking for an Apache woman, escaped from government custody. Word is she came through these parts." Wade's jaw tightened. "Ain't seen no one like that." The man's horse shifted, snorting. "We got reason to think otherwise. Heard you been keeping strange company." The bounty hunter behind him laughed, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "Hell, I say we look for ourselves. Don't strike me as a man who tells the truth easy." Wade's hand brushed the butt of his Colt. "You step on my land uninvited, you'll find I ain't the man to lie neither." A long pause. The wind moved through the sagebrush like a whisper. Then one of the soldiers raised a hand. "Search the place." Wade's voice turned sharp, steel through gravel. "You ain't got a warrant, and you sure as hell don't have my permission." The bounty man smirked. "Didn't ask for either." That was the moment everything broke. Wade moved first. His rifle came up with a clean, practiced motion, the kind only learned from years of regret and gunsmoke. The first shot cracked through the night, echoing off the cliffs. A soldier fell backward off his horse, dead before he hit the dirt. The others scattered, firing wild into the dark. Bullets tore through the porch railing, splintering wood and filling the air with the stench of gunpowder. Inside, Luda jerked upright at the sound, clutching her children. She crawled to the window, heart pounding, and saw flashes of light. Muzzle fire, cutting through the dark like lightning. "Wade!" she cried, voice shaking. He shouted back through the smoke, "Get in the cellar, now!" She hesitated, but the cry of another gunshot sent her moving. She gathered the babies, wrapped them in a blanket, and ran for the barn. Behind the feed room, beneath a loose wooden hatch, Wade had built a storm cellar. A crude hole reinforced with timbers. He'd meant it for grain. Now it would serve for survival. Luda climbed down into the darkness, clutching her children to her chest. The air smelled of damp earth and old wood. She could hear the chaos above, the thundering hooves, the shouts, the shots. Then silence, only the hiss of wind through the cracks and her own breathing. She pressed her forehead against the wall and whispered a prayer in her native tongue. Not for herself, but for the man above who'd chosen to stand between her and the world's cruelty. Wade reloaded behind the trough, the barrel of his rifle smoking hot. 2 men were down now, 3 left. One of them, the younger soldier, looked scared, like he hadn't expected a real fight. "Ransom!" the leader shouted from behind the barn. "You're harboring a fugitive. The law's clear. Turn her over or burn with her." Wade wiped the sweat from his brow. "Ain't the first time I've been on the wrong side of the law." A bullet whined past his head, biting into the post behind him. He dove to the side, firing twice more. The younger soldier screamed, hit in the leg, and crawled behind a barrel. The bounty men circled around the corral, shouting to flank him. One of them hurled a lantern. It smashed against the barn door, spilling fire across the straw. The flames caught quick. Within seconds, the dry wood began to roar. "God damn it," Wade growled. He turned toward the barn just as a figure burst from the side door. Luda, her face streaked with soot, her hair wild in the firelight. In her hands was a bow, carved from the old ash branch she'd kept since the winter storms. "Get back inside," Wade yelled. She ignored him. Her fingers drew the bowstring, and the arrow, wrapped in cloth and fire, shot through the smoke. It struck the bounty man square in the chest. He fell, screaming, rolling in flames. The soldiers froze, stunned by the sight of an Apache woman standing tall amid the burning light. Wade fired again, hitting the last bounty hunter in the shoulder. But he didn't see the third soldier, a grizzled man creeping up from behind with a knife drawn. "Wade!" Luda screamed. He spun too late. The soldier lunged, but before the blade could strike, another arrow hissed through the air, piercing the man's throat. Wade fired once more. The soldier dropped, and suddenly, the night went still again. Only the fire moved now, swallowing the barn, climbing the fences, eating through everything they'd built. Wade staggered, gripping his shoulder where blood spread through his shirt. The pain hit him like a hammer. Luda ran to him, grabbing his arm. "You hurt." He tried to laugh but coughed instead. "Nothing new about that." The firelight turned her face gold and red. Behind them, the barn collapsed with a groan, sparks bursting into the night sky. "We have to go," she said, urgent, tugging at him. He looked around the property. The porch riddled with bullet holes, the horses scattered, the house glowing like a lantern about to burst. "This land's dead," he said quietly. Luda's grip tightened. "Then we leave it." He nodded once, grimly. They stumbled to the cellar. Luda lifted the hatch, helping Wade down the steps. The twins whimpered, frightened by the smell of smoke. "Hold them close," he told her, coughing through the haze. The ceiling groaned above them. Heat poured down, unbearable. He could feel the weight of the fire pressing against the boards. "Wade!" Luda cried, tears streaking through soot on her cheeks. He looked up at her, eyes glinting through the dark. "Listen to me. When that roof gives, you run west, toward the creek. Don't stop till you see the canyon wall. There's a trail there, follow it." She shook her head. "No, you come." But before he could argue, the ground shuddered. The barn collapsed fully, fire roaring through the gaps. They burst from the cellar as the roof caved in behind them. Smoke clawed at their throats. Sparks stung their faces. Luda threw a blanket over the babies and half-dragged Wade toward the gate. The flames lit the desert like daylight. Red, furious, alive. They reached the ridge just as the wind shifted. The house went up in a single, thunderous roar, flames licking at the sky. Wade turned back once, breathing hard. His face was streaked with ash and blood, his shoulders soaked through. "That's it then," he muttered. "Every ghost in that house gone for good." Luda steadied him, her hand firm at his back. "No ghosts," she said softly. "Only fire to clean what's left." They stood there for a moment, 2 figures framed against the inferno, their shadows long and black across the desert floor. Behind them, the Ransom Ranch collapsed in on itself. Timbers splitting, windows bursting, embers rising like souls taking flight. Before them, the vast emptiness of the mesa stretched out under the dying moonlight. Endless, silent, waiting. Luda shifted the babies in her arms, looked west. "We go now." Wade nodded, his voice hoarse. "Yeah. Time we found somewhere that ain't cursed. They walked away from the burning ranch, slow at first, then faster, until the fire was just aglow behind them. The night wind carried the smoke across the plains, but ahead of them, the first line of dawn touched the far horizon, pale, silver, and soft. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. The fire that had devoured the Ransom Ranch still glowed on the horizon when dawn broke. Ash floated in the air like dying snowflakes. Behind them lay everything they'd lost. A house turned to embers, a life burned clean away. Ahead stretched the mountains, red and jagged as old scars. They rode slow at first. Wade slumped over the saddle, his shirt soaked with blood, his breath shallow. Luda walked beside him, guiding the horse up a narrow trail cut between sandstone ridges. The twins slept in a sling on her back, their soft weight pressing against her spine, keeping her moving when her legs begged to stop. By noon, the desert gave way to the foothills, dry grass turning to pine, sand to stone. The air cooled, but Wade's skin burned hotter. He didn't complain. Men like him rarely did. But when he slipped from the saddle and hit the ground hard, she knew it was bad. Luda dragged him under a ledge to shade him from the sun. His face was pale, lips cracked, sweat shining on his forehead. The bullet wound in his shoulder had reopened during the climb. She tore a strip from her dress and pressed it to the wound. He winced, groaning through his teeth. "Easy," she whispered. "You strong, but not stone." He tried to laugh, failed. "I've been called worse." His humor faded fast. The fever was setting in, deep and angry. She could see it in his eyes, the glassy sheen that came before delirium. "You need rest," she said. He shook his head weakly. "We stop. They'll catch up." "No one follow fire that big," she replied, glancing down the trail. The sky behind them was black with smoke. "They think we dead." That was the first time Wade let go, body slack, breath shallow, trusting her to keep him alive. The Apache woman moved with the sure hands of someone who'd mended wounds long before medicine had names. She left the twins in the shade beside Wade and went searching. Her bare feet made no sound on the mountain path. She gathered what she needed: wild sage, yucca root, a sprig of silver leaf that grew where the stones held water. Her people had called it the herb that steals fever. She crushed the leaves between stones, mixed them with cool water, and pressed the paste against his wound. Then she built a small fire and brewed a bitter tea. Wade stirred when she lifted his head to drink. His eyes flickered open, cloudy, distant. "Smells worse than cavalry stew," he muttered. "Good," she said. "Means it work." He forced the tea down, grimacing. "You always this kind to your enemies?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Only when they stop being one." He didn't have the strength to answer. By nightfall, the fever hit full. Wade shivered and muttered through broken dreams. Fragments of names, places, and orders barked long ago. Luda sat beside him, wiping his face with a damp cloth. The firelight flickered across his scars, each one a memory she could not see but somehow understood. When he began to thrash, whispering apologies to ghosts she couldn't name, she took his hand and pressed it against her chest. "Quiet," she murmured in Apache. "The war is not here." He stilled slowly, the way a storm does when it runs out of rain. The next day he drifted between worlds. Luda worked silently, feeding the twins, tending the wound, boiling water. Every time she looked at him, she saw the man who had carried her out of death's reach, and the uniform he once wore behind his eyes. That afternoon, when he woke briefly, his voice was raw. "Your husband? He was a brave man, wasn't he?" She paused, turning from the fire. "How you know?" "The way you carry yourself," he said, "like you've been loved by someone who taught you not to bow." Her eyes softened, but her jaw tightened. "He was brave. Too much, maybe." She stared into the flames. "He believed what white soldiers said, that peace could come. He took children to them, waving white cloth, thinking it means safe." Her voice broke slightly. "They shot him first, said he was hiding guns under the blanket." Wade's throat tightened. The air between them filled with a silence heavier than any bullet. "I was there," he said finally, voice hollow. "Maybe not that day, but others like it. I wore the same colors. Thought I was fighting for something good. She didn't look at him. And now? He swallowed. Now I ain't sure what good means anymore. The fire popped. The twins whimpered in their sleep. For a long time, that was all. Just wind, fire, and the shared weight of memory. When dusk fell again, Wade's fever broke. He woke to the soft sound of Luda's voice, low and rhythmic, singing in a language he didn't know. The melody drifted through the pines like smoke. It was gentle but strong, a song built from centuries of survival. The baby stirred, calmed, then fell back into quiet dreams. He blinked, disoriented. That song, it's beautiful. She didn't stop singing, but when she finished, she said, "It's for the lost ones, for those who walk but no longer breathe." He sat up slowly, grimacing from the pain. The firelight played over her face, tired, resolute, illuminated by something ancient. "If there's another life after this," he said softly, "I'd like to hear that song again, somewhere that ain't got blood in the dirt." Luda's eyes lifted to his, calm and unflinching. "Then don't let it fall again." Wade nodded. It wasn't a promise spoken aloud, but it was one that mattered. They stayed hidden in the mountain pass for 3 more days. Wade's strength returned enough for him to walk. The road ahead wound upward, narrow, treacherous, bordered by cliffs that fell into endless valleys below. Each step hurt, but he kept going. Luda carried one child, he carried the other. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer a wall, but a bridge. Once as they climbed, Luda pointed to the far ridge. Smoke rose faintly from somewhere beyond the peaks. "Sacred waters," she said. "My people go there when world too cruel. They say spirits live in the steam, heal what no hand can." He followed her gaze. "You think they'll take us in?" "They take anyone who come in peace," she answered. "But not if you carry hate." Wade stared at the horizon, the long line of it glowing red in the sunset. "I left that behind with the fire." "Good," she said simply. They walked until the light faded, then camped near a stream that whispered over stone. The moon rose, soft and silver, painting the cliffs around them in ghostly light. Luda bathed the twins, humming again. That same song, softer this time. Wade watched from the fire, his hand resting over his bandaged shoulder. He thought of all the years he'd spent running from what he'd done, from what the uniform had made of him, and he realized for the first time that redemption didn't come from killing or dying. It came from choosing to protect something instead of destroy it. By dawn, the trail opened up. Before them lay a vast valley veiled in mist, tall pines on the rim, and from its heart, thin ribbons of steam rising into the morning air. The light touched the surface of distant pools, turning them silver blue. "The sacred waters," Luda whispered. Wade stood beside her, his arm around her shoulder for balance. "Looks like heaven found a place to hide." She smiled faintly. "No, just earth remembering to forgive." And he took a deep breath, feeling the chill of the mountain air in his lungs. Below them, the world seemed quiet, untouched, a place where blood and fire had never existed. "Let's go," he said softly. Together they began the descent, toward the valley, toward the rising steam, toward whatever life waited beyond the sins of the old one. The valley opened beneath them like a secret the mountains had guarded for centuries. Mist drifted through the pines, wrapping the world in silence. Steam rose from the hot springs that bubbled up between moss-covered stones, turning the air soft and shimmering. Luda stopped at the ridge and bowed her head. "We are here," she whispered. Wade stood beside her, leaning on the rifle he used now as a crutch. His shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, and his breath came shallow, but the sight below almost made him forget the pain. "It's beautiful," he murmured. "It's sacred," Luda corrected gently. "No white man ever walk here." He smiled faintly. "Guess I'll be the first to try not to ruin it." By the time they reached the valley floor, the air was thick with the scent of cedar and warm stone. The hot springs hissed quietly, their steam curling up into the branches of the cottonwoods. From the far side, a shadow moved, then another. Within moments, they were surrounded, half a dozen figures stepping out from behind the rocks and trees, bows drawn, arrows notched. Luda raised her hand slowly. Brothers, she said in Apache, her voice calm but firm. It's me, Luda. The oldest of the men squinted. Luda of the Red Mesa? We thought you dead. She shook her head. Not yet. She pointed toward Wade, who stood still, hands visible. He saved my life. He saved my children. The man's eyes narrowed. He's white. Yes, she said evenly, but not like the others. The man glanced toward the twins in the sling across her back. And those? My blood, my heart. He hesitated. Then he lowered his bow. Come, a pony must see this with her own eyes. They led them through a grove of pines to a cluster of earthen lodges near the water. Smoke rose from the chimneys, carrying the smell of burning sage and juniper. An old woman sat beside one of the fires, her hair silver as moonlight, her eyes sharp as flint. Luda ran to her, dropping to her knees. A pony, she breathed, tears spilling before she could stop them. The woman reached out with trembling hands, touching Luda's face, her shoulders, her hair. Child, she whispered, I thought the desert took you. It almost did. Luda turned, motioning toward Wade. But he did not let it. A pony's gaze shifted. Her eyes hardened when they landed on the wounded man. Why bring death to our home? He is not death, Luda said. He carries enough of it already. The old woman studied him. His pale skin, his ragged shirt, the way he leaned to one side as though the earth itself weighed on him. Then she saw the blood. He is dying, she said simply. Yes, Luda replied, but he saved us. Help him, please. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then a pony sighed. Bring him to the water. They carried Wade to the edge of the hot spring and laid him on a blanket of woven reeds. The air smelled of earth and sulfur, the steam rising in thin veils that glowed in the fading light. A pony knelt beside him, unwrapping the bandage around his shoulder. The wound was red, swollen, angry. She murmured something in Apache and reached for her pouch. Luda recognized the ritual, the healing of the spirit water. From the pouch, a pony took a handful of white clay and mixed it with spring water. She spread it over Wade's wound, chanting softly. The words were old, older than any border, older than any war. When the chant ended, she dipped a cloth into the steaming water and pressed it to his chest. Does it hurt? She asked him in English, her voice unexpectedly clear. Wade opened one eye. Only when I breathe. That means you live, she said, almost smiling. He coughed, winced. You got a name for the one who don't quit even when he should? A pony looked at Luda. He jokes. That's a good sign. But not everyone shared her mercy. A younger warrior stepped forward, glaring. He should not be here. White men killed our sons, burned our homes. How long before he brings more? Wade forced himself upright, face pale but steady. You think I could lead an army looking like this? He gestured weakly to his wound. I ain't here to harm anyone. Just trying to make something right before I die. The young man's jaw tightened. Words are easy. Luda stepped between them. Then judge by deeds. He fought soldiers to save me. He burned his own home so I could live. A pony raised her hand. Enough. The water will decide. It accepts truth, rejects lies. That night, under the light of the moon, the tribe gathered around the largest of the springs. The air shimmered with steam, silver and ghostly. A pony stood in the center, holding a bowl carved from river stone. These waters cleanse not just the body, she said in her native tongue, but the soul that carries too much of the past. Luda helped Wade to his feet. He could barely walk, but he didn't resist when she led him forward. The old woman motioned for them to kneel at the edge of the pool. You both carry pain, she said, one born from betrayal, the other from guilt. Tonight you leave both in the water. Luda nodded solemnly. Wade looked uncertain. I ain't much for ceremonies, he muttered. A pony's eyes glimmered. This is not ceremony. It is forgiveness. She poured the spring water over their hands, their foreheads, their hearts. Then she spoke the blessing. Let the desert forget your footprints. Let the mountains remember your names. When it was done, she smiled faintly. Now you may start again. Wade looked at Luda, at the wet strands of hair clinging to her face, at the twins sleeping in their cradle beside the fire. And for the first time since he'd buried his wife years ago, he felt something break open in his chest. It wasn't grief this time. It was peace. Days passed. Wade's wound healed faster than anyone expected. He began to help where he could, cutting wood, hauling water, repairing the fence around the goat pens. The children followed him everywhere. The older villagers watched from a distance, some still suspicious, others simply curious. One morning, a pony called for a naming ceremony. "The children," she said, "must be known by the spirits of this valley." Luda gathered the twins, one boy, one girl, and stood beside Wade at the edge of the spring. A pony raised her hands to the mist. "The boy shall be called Dasan," she declared, "grandson of the wind. May he carry freedom wherever he walks." She turned to the girl. "And she shall be Tiva, morning light. May she bring warmth where there is shadow." The crowd murmured approval. Luda smiled through tears. Wade knelt, touching the children's tiny hands. "Dasan and Tiva," he said softly, trying the names on his tongue. "They sound stronger than I'll ever be." A pony looked at him with something close to respect. Strength is not in fighting. It's in staying when running is easier. He nodded, humbled. That evening, the sky turned the color of copper. Steam from the springs caught the last light, drifting like smoke from unseen fires. Wade and Luda stood side by side at the water's edge. The twins slept between them, wrapped in soft deerskin. The valley was quiet except for the bubbling of the springs and the distant cry of an eagle overhead. Luda spoke first. "When I was little, a pony said this place heals wounds that cannot be seen. I never believed her." "And now?" Wade asked. She looked at him. "Now I see it heals two kinds of blood." He smiled faintly. "Never thought I'd find peace in Apache land." She brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Peace doesn't care where it lives, only that someone's willing to protect it." They watched the steam twist upward, glowing in the first light of dawn. For a long time, neither spoke. They didn't need to. Two worlds stood there, one carved from stone and sun, the other from wind and forgiveness. And for a fleeting moment, they fit together as though they'd never been apart. The water rippled around their feet, carrying away the dust of everything they used to be. Weeks passed since the night of fire and flight. The mountain valley had turned green again, the rain softening the red clay, washing away the ashes from their clothes and their hearts. Wade's shoulder healed clean, the scar running pale against his sunburned skin, like a reminder carved by life itself. He had begun to walk without the rifle for support, though he still kept it close by. Old habits die slower than men. Every morning he rose before the sun and joined the tribe in their work. He cut logs for new lodges, hauled stones for the fire pits, and taught the younger men how to set fence posts the way ranchers did back east. In return, they taught him how to track elk through the forest and how to move quietly enough that even the birds didn't scatter. He didn't speak much, but he didn't need to. Out here, silence was a language too. The wind through the pines, the low hum of water over stone, the rhythm of axes echoing across the valley. Luda watched him from the edge of the clearing one morning as he showed a boy how to sharpen a plow blade. Wade's face was calm, but his movements were slow, deliberate, as if every gesture was measured against the violence he'd once known. A pony stood beside her, old eyes scanning the same scene. "He works like someone trying to build forgiveness," she said. Luda nodded softly. "Maybe he is." The old woman turned to her. "And you? Have you forgiven?" Luda didn't answer. Her gaze drifted toward the hills where the smoke of the soldiers' camps had once darkened the horizon. "The land remembers," she murmured, "even when people forget." A pony said nothing more. She didn't have to. By the second moon, rumors began to reach them. Whispers carried by traders and travelers moving along the canyon trails. The army was pushing deeper into Apache lands again. A new fort was being built near the southern ridge. They said the soldiers were hunting for runaways. The word came like a shadow spreading across the valley. That night, Wade sat by the fire, his jaw tight. He stared into the flames, the light dancing across the rifle laid beside him. "They'll come this way sooner or later," he said quietly. Luda fed another stick into the fire. "You could leave before they do." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "And go where?" There's no land I can walk on that don't already got ghosts waiting for me. She studied him, the firelight reflecting in her dark eyes. You're not one of them anymore, Wade. He gave a tired smile. Try telling them that. The next morning he went to a pony. The old woman was grinding herbs near the spring, the steam curling around her like breath from the earth. I want to stay, he said. Help your people however I can. A pony didn't look up. You already have. He shook his head. Not enough. I can build, I can teach, I can fight if I have to. But I ain't here to take what ain't mine. She stopped her work, meeting his gaze. And yet you understand what so many men never did. He nodded slowly. Maybe I just ran out of ways to be wrong. The old woman smiled faintly. Then stay. But know this, son of the desert, when men come again, you will not fight as a soldier. You will fight as a keeper of this land. That is a harder battle. I've had enough easy ones, he said. For days after, Wade worked like a man possessed. He helped clear new fields near the stream, teaching the tribe how to build irrigation channels from old ranching tricks. He hunted with the men, returning with venison and elk hide. At night, he sat with Luda and the children by the fire. Dasan, the boy, was already crawling, fast as a lizard in the dust. Tiva slept curled against her mother, her tiny fingers wrapped around the edge of Wade's old handkerchief. Sometimes Luda caught him staring at them, a quiet, faraway look in his eyes. You think about your wife? She asked once. He nodded. Sometimes. Mostly, I think she'd tell me not to waste what's left. She'd be right, Luda said. You still have hands to build with, and a heart that still beats. He smiled. Didn't know I still had that till I met you. She didn't blush. Apache women didn't, but her lips curved slightly like the earth itself softening after rain. One evening, as the sun sank low behind the ridges, Wade walked alone to the far edge of the valley. The sky burned orange and crimson, the color of blood and forgiveness. He carried his rifle slung across his shoulder, the same one that had guarded, hunted, and killed in equal measure. He stopped near a patch of soft red earth and began to dig, slowly, methodically, as though each shovelful of dirt carried a lifetime. When the hole was deep enough, he placed the rifle inside. The barrel gleamed once in the dying light, then vanished beneath the soil. Luda appeared behind him, her steps silent. She watched as he pressed the earth down with his hands, leaving no mark but a small mound beneath the fading sun. Why do this? She asked quietly. Because every time I carry that thing, he said, voice low, I remember what I was, and I'm tired of remembering. She nodded. The land will keep it safe. It doesn't judge. He looked at her, dust streaked across his palms. Maybe that's why I trust it more than people. She stepped closer and placed her hand on his shoulder. Then trust me too. He did. He didn't say it, but he did. That night the tribe gathered for a feast. The sky above was full of stars, clear and endless. A pony sang the song of renewal, the same one she'd sung when spring first came to the mountains. Luda joined her, her voice carrying through the valley like wind through canyon stone. Wade sat beside the fire with Dasan asleep in his arms. Tiva rested against Luda's shoulder, her tiny hand gripping a strand of her mother's hair. He looked around, at the faces lit by firelight, at the land that had once been cursed and was now home. And for the first time in years, he felt no fear of the morning. He leaned close to Luda and whispered, If they come again, I'll stand with you. She turned, meeting his eyes. We will stand together, not to fight for land, but for peace. He smiled, small and quiet. Then maybe peace will finally listen. At dawn, he walked to the ridge above the valley. The first rays of sunlight spilled over the rocks, painting the land in golden fire. Luda stood beside him, the children crawling at their feet, their laughter soft and pure against the whispering wind. He looked out across the red mesa, the same desert that once killed everything it touched. Now it shimmered with life. People will come, Wade said, almost to himself. They always do, Luda nodded. The Apache say the earth belongs to no one. Only those who know how to keep it are allowed to stay. He turned to her, eyes full of quiet awe. Then I'll learn, she smiled. You already are.